Hey guys, I am John with the Parking Lot Rebels, back to talk about the Capitol riots from last week and the fallout that came along. So on Wednesday, Trump had a rally in front of the White House, reiterating a lot of the arguments he's been making over the last few months about a stolen election and everything behind that. Now, of course, he's been saying this for months that the election was stolen, even though there's no real evidence and nobody's actually backing up outside of, I think, six Republican congressmen right now who are forcing the Stop the Steal kind of campaign. Now, let's not make the mistake of thinking that's not about raising money for their own purposes because they can get Trump supporters on their side. Anyway, on Wednesday, Trump gathered them in front of the White House to essentially embolden his base and making arguments that it was likely that Mike Pence could possibly stop the Senate confirmation of for Joe Biden. Now, that was not an actual thing. The Senate confirmation for Joe Biden and his administration, it's a complete formality. It had nothing to do with anything. So, a better move if you were a psycho rioter who wanted to overtake the Capitol. You probably should have been in Washington in December to stop the Electoral College from gathering. But, you know, some opportunities fly away in the wind trying to stop the election. Now, I think it's important to note a few things at this point. I don't think you could legally hold Donald Trump responsible for inciting a riot. He was speaking half an hour beforehand. He never made any call for direct violence. I believe he specifically said a peaceful protest a few times, and even afterwards, he tweeted that people should be going home. Those might have been half-hearted, but you couldn't really accuse him of inciting a riot. Now, he is responsible for ratcheting up tensions enough to cause the violence, so he's not completely innocent in this whole escapade. At the same time, I think it's also very likely that the people there, the protesters, rioters, went there with bad intentions. It's coming out now in the news that there were former military personnel there who had organized, who came with zip ties and handcuffs to essentially, I suppose, kidnap people. I don't know what, but came there with bad intentions. So it seems like this was only going to go one way all along. So I'm sure you all know what happens next. The protest turns into a riot. They storm the Capitol and quickly cross the police lines out front. There's a lot of people questioning the action of the police at this point. It seemed like they were definitely understaffed and did not do a good job of obviously holding the front line. The police are now saying after the fact that they were actually withdrawing in order to consolidate their forces somewhere inside the building itself. I can't comment on the police strategy at that point. There are some questionable acts by the police. I believe two officers have been suspended for supporting the protesters, the rioters. They were taking selfies and possibly giving directions and wearing mega hats. I should correct myself, actually. One of the officers is said to now, he seemed to be leading a group of the rioters through the building, but the reports are saying now that he was actually leading them away from the main hall that was unlocked. So he was protecting the congressman in the main hall. So a pretty decent act of bravery under a very stressful time. Obviously, the stats are horrifying. There are 6 people, I believe, dead. A police officer was hit in the head and died later from his injuries. Another police officer just committed suicide over the weekend, and the Washington police have confirmed that that was related to the riot. 3 more people died in extenuating circumstances. I think there were taser accidents as well as falling off the outside ledge when they tried to climb it. And one protester rioter was shot by the police. So any kind of death toll or injuries is obviously this should be condemned, and it's mostly being condemned across the board. Of course, the stats are horrible, obviously. The 6 people dead, I believe, right now. One was a police officer who was hit in the head and died later from his injuries. Another was a police officer who committed suicide over the weekend. 3 more rioters died from extenuating circumstances. I believe there was some taser accidents and one person fell off the ledge outside while trying to scale it. And another person was shot by the police. I'm sure you've seen her in the news. So obviously, this is a big disaster. We can't condone anything like this or political violence. It serves no real purposes in the 21st century. It's the information age. Doing stuff like this gains you nothing. But like the politicians always say, never let a good crisis go to waste. So it didn't take long for liberal media to start conflating this to be all Trump supporters supported the rioting. But at the same time, a good chunk of Americans did support the riots initially. The New York Post was reporting that 19% of Americans supported the siege on the Capitol. So 19%, that's probably something like half of Republicans, if not a couple of Democrats thrown in there. So the condoning of this violence is kind of upsetting. We could attribute that to desensitization after seeing a year of protests across the country for different means, but the national reaction to what we just saw is not great. To right wingers being removed from private company platforms. I think for years, Republicans have been saying that private companies should be free to do whatever they want. There's been reference to the cake baking fiasco, I believe in Arizona from a few years ago. The argument was that an individual owner of a cake shop should be allowed to make or not make whatever cakes he sees fit. So if Twitter and Facebook want to remove some of their users, their customers, they should be able to do so. And I think I would agree with that on a surface level. As a company, you should be free to do business with whoever you want. So if Twitter doesn't want conservatives on there anymore, then conservatives are free to start their own social media app and talk amongst themselves accordingly. But this stops making sense when the platforms that host these apps now are also targeting the conservative online circles. So when you've been kicked off Twitter, you make your own app, and now the app stores for Apple, and everyone has an iPhone that I know of, and the website hosting networks at Amazon are also targeting these same people. It's no longer a free speech issue. It's targeted harassment, it's collusion, and it is probably the best example yet of big tech having far too much power and able to influence our discourse. I don't mean to sound like a conspiracy theorist. I think they generally just have left-wing views and can't really comprehend the logic between many right-wing arguments. And I don't think it's necessarily profit-driven. I think they probably believe they're doing what's best. This is just an organic response of people living in an echo chamber and having too much influence at the highest levels. So I obviously have no idea what's going to happen next year. With Trump offline, his ability to rally his troops is greatly diminished. And I think even mainstream Republicans are going to be distancing themselves from him in the immediate future. The only people left are people in hardcore blue states, people like Ted Cruz and other senators who are still able to use the Trump brand as a way to fundraise for their own purposes. So they'll remain loyal and try and draw as much cash off Trump supporters as they can. That's what's happening now. In terms of a 2024 presidential run, I think that probably was the plan until last week. Trump probably still will run. I mean, failed presidential campaigns happen all the time. They happen every 4 years. But his ability to get more than just his base is going to be greatly diminished, and he's clearly polarized. Sorry, clearly, and he's clearly organized his opposition. Democratic voters came out in record numbers this year to beat his own record number of Republican numbers. I'm saying numbers too much. But anyways, the Trump opposition is organized to a high degree at this point, and they were able to blow him out of the water in this last election. So for him to come back without a social media influence, I don't think that looks like a very successful idea to me. And he'll be in his late 70s, and you can tell he's already losing a step as it is. So in another 4 years from now, I'm not sure what that looks like. At the same time, I'm curious about the implications of what this online campaign against Trump, what that looks like in the long term, because there are campaign regulations about how much you can contribute to a presidential candidate. So for these several multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations to have Trump barred from their online platforms, How is that not a leg up for Democrats? How is that not a leg up for the left-wing agenda? So that does not seem to be something that's sustainable, right? This kind of imbalance in the way we're allowed access to information is not good for discourse or the country overall. So I'm also not positive about Republicans' ability to influence or change anything that's going on right now. So it's going to take the tide turning a different direction that we haven't foreseen just yet. Anyways, I am John with the Parking Lot Rebels. If you've liked this video, please like and subscribe. We got to get those numbers up. If you have anything to say or to add to the conversation, please hit us in the comment section. Always willing to hear some constructive criticism or just some good trash talk. Hit us with it. We'll see you next time.